The bar being too low is its own kind of exhaustion. The people who find their way to our work are almost never struggling. They might be tired, or they might feel a quiet, determined readiness for something to shift, but they aren't behind or spiraling or looking for rescue. Far from it. In most rooms, they're the most capable person present, even if they would be the last to state it that way. And they've been that for a long time. What they might be is tired and done with rooms, environments, people that can't meet them where they are. Tired of places where the bar is low, but calling it low feels impolite and ungracious, and they aren't arrogant. They might be weary of frameworks built for someone earlier in the journey. They are done with a particular kind of loneliness, of holding themselves to something that no one around seems to notice, let alone share. What all of those feelings are pointing to is misalignment, and what it means to be a person of standards, met fully in a culture of standards without apology, and that is what this video is about. I recently got off a call with someone interested in joining us at the Prestige, our applied somatics academy. They may even be watching this video. This person holds himself to a standard of operating in life and in their work that is genuinely rare. When I shared with them what we look for in a new member and how we've shaped the culture here, they were relieved, excited even, honored. They recognized a place that could meet them where they were, a place built for capable, conscious leaders. And I completely understand that feeling of resonance because I've been that person too. It's rare to find a room, a group of peers, or even mentors who actually get it. When I mentioned the time zone difference, for example, they were calling in from the other side of the globe, which puts our events at roughly 3 a.m. their time. Their response was immediate. Don't worry about me. I can do it. When something is of value, I do whatever it takes. And they said this with quiet conviction, steadiness behind their eyes that backed up what they had shared about their context, all the ways that for decades they had shaped themselves personally and professionally, consistently, without fanfare or acknowledgement. And when they shared that, I am a hell yes to that kind of orientation. That's how I conduct my own life and work. Ownership over convenience. That is resonance, but it is rare. A culture of standards is not a set of arbitrary rules. It's not a vibe. It's not a high-minded aspiration posted somewhere that everyone can see. It's a set of lived orientations, things that people actually do consistently between them and them because it's who they are. And when enough people in the same room operate from that kind of orientation, something happens that you can feel and see and witness, especially over time. The bar lifts, not because anyone demanded that it lift, but because the room itself made it inevitable. Here's what I've come to understand that way of orienting to be. These are not prestige rules, by the way. They are what I have observed in people over decades who carry genuine standards in any domain, at any level. There is something to be said for first, commitment and ownership over easy convenience. A person with standards does not reorganize their commitment around what's easy. They orient their life around what is meaningful and what their commitment requires. This sounds obvious until you watch how rarely it actually happens. Convenience is the default, and it's the path of least resistance, and it's usually dressed up as reasonable. Something like, it's unreasonable to expect me to get up early in the morning. It's unreasonable that such and such would occur during nap time or during this conflict, or I might be traveling, or I don't know what will be happening in my life in 6 weeks from now, and I don't want to be inconvenienced. Do you get my point? So the person who chooses, in contrast, the person who chooses ownership over and over in small ways and large, that choice or that orientation compounds and it becomes the structure of a life. The 3 a.m. answer was an example of this. And it's not about whether or not you get up in the middle of the night or not. It's just the natural response of someone for whom commitment is the baseline, not the exception. Second, I've learned that if you show up in a way to give value in order to receive value, it amplifies value for all across the board, right? So this is not a new concept, but let's discuss. The extractive orientation. What can I get from this room? What can I get from this relationship? What can I get from this program? It's so common that it's practically invisible. And people don't even recognize it in themselves, right? But the person of standards brings something different. They show up with something to offer. So yes, they're looking at receiving, but they're also showing up in a way that brings their curiosity, a question worth asking, a perspective worth sharing, a quality of attention that makes others sharper simply by them being in the room. And what they've learned, often through hard experience, is that this is not a sacrifice. This is how value is actually created. So a room where everyone is showing up in that way is a room where everyone is receiving more than anything that they put in. That is not idealism. That is the mechanics of how good relationship or good environments of reciprocity work. The next orientation of a culture of standards: show up when you say you'll show up. This one sounds small, but it isn't. The person who keeps their word about small things is the person whose word means something about large things. Reliability is not a logistical value. It's a signal about the integrity between a person's inside and their outside, between what they say and what they do. In a culture of standards, this becomes the baseline. And what it produces is something rare, a camaraderie where people can actually trust one another, where agreements mean something, where nobody is managing around the question of whether or not this person will actually come through, or it's okay to ask, or it's not okay to ask. There is a trust that is the substrate on which real development happens. You cannot do the deep work in a room where you can't rely on it. By the way, we just held an event around the somatics of authenticity in answers. So we called it the dirty yes, the dirty no, where we explored this in depth, where a person's answer, but also their direction in life is divided and the costs of that, or where it is united and what is able to be created and compounded in value over time. It was a really incredible event. Anyways, and that leads me to the next point. Create space and care about what you do. There is excellence in the details. It doesn't matter whether you're attempting something extraordinary or an ordinary everyday. The excellence is found in the details and the things that didn't have to be thoughtful, but they are. The effort that comes from giving a damn, not from just obligation or what I am paid to do. This is the artistry underneath of the standard. It's a difference between someone who completes a task and someone who really tends to what they are about. And it shows. Not always loudly, but consistently. Over time, the quality is unmistakable. The person who operates this way notices it, by the way, in others immediately, because you can recognize what you carry. And that recognition, naming it when you see it, acknowledging the care someone puts into their work, is a form of standard keeping and resonance as well. It's how a culture of excellence reproduces itself. For example, what's something that you've done recently in your work, in your practices, in your relationships, where you brought more artistry or devotion or care than what was actually required? Now, what was your internal experience of that? Was it met? When was the last time that you also named that level of care or excellence in someone else? And this brings me to the next point. So honor excellence in detail and therefore see it in others. A really amazing hack. There's not very many hacks in the long path of mastery, but this is one. If you want more acknowledgement of your impact, more evidence of that what you're building matters, it's worth asking whether you're offering that to others. This is not transactional. That's not what I'm talking about. It's reciprocity. It's a practice of actually paying attention to qualitative artistry. For example, review thoughtfully a book that made a difference for you. Take the time to actually subscribe and like content or creators that contribute to your life valuably. Shameless plug for ours down below. Teasing. But take a moment, send people a thoughtful message. Say thank you for the ways that they show up where they don't have to, and they put a little bit of extra care. It matters. And when you are a person who brings that level of attention and acknowledgement to others, I'm telling you, it will amplify in how it comes back to you. A culture of standards is a culture of paying attention. People who hold themselves high to something high, they tend to see that and acknowledge that and love that in others. And when they name it, the room lifts. Okay, so next, receive challenge as data for growth, not a verdict. We covered this recently in a cheeky way in our video around the anatomy of a poor performer, and I'll make sure it's linked as next to watch in the video after this. But it's easy to have high standards when things are going well, when the feedback is positive and everyone's celebrating you and the room is affirming. The actual test is what happens when you are challenged, when something that you've built is questioned, especially by someone you respect. When feedback arrives, it doesn't feel good in the immediate. The person who can sit with that, who can take it in without collapsing or defending, who can ask what's true in it before deciding what to do with it, that person has access to a quality of development that most will never reach. Because the mainstream median is that people tend to spend an enormous amount of energy protecting themselves from the very information that would move them forward. Receiving challenge as data is a trained capacity. It's a form of pressure. And if you're curious, by the way that you receive challenge, well, it breaks down in one of 4 patterns, and you can map that down below with our Somatic Skins Quiz. But, this trained capacity, it doesn't come naturally to just anyone, but it is trainable. And in a room where that's the standard, people develop faster than they thought was possible. Next, in a culture of excellence or a culture of standards, the work doesn't stay in the room. This is the one that separates a culture of standards from a culture of good conversation. Insight is not development. A room can be brilliant, generative, genuinely alive, and produce nothing if nobody there takes it anywhere. The standard isn't engagement in the immediate only, it's also in application. The person with character and standards leaves that room and does something with whatever happened there. They can derive value and bring it back into their life and test it. They implement. They plug it in and see what happens, and they come back with evidence of what worked, what didn't, what they now understand differently. That feedback loop is what makes a room, an environment, a culture compound over time. Without it, even the best environments become a place to feel good rather than a place to become more capable. And feeling good is not the only point. On this point, before we recap and wrap for today, I just want to give you this rule of thumb. If you are intentional about the places you train, who you train with, who supports you, the peers, the allies that you build, Make the assumption that anytime you show up to something, there is a value to take away. Practice strengthening that muscle of what is the value that I receive from today, and how do I translate it to my targets, to my goals, to what matters to me in my life. When you can strengthen that muscle of connectivity and translation, just watch how your life generatively changes. Okay, so to recap, here's the thing about a culture of standards. For the right person, being held to standards is not demanding. It's actually relief, because the bar finally matches what they already hold for themselves. The people in the room are already doing these things, and the standard isn't an imposition, it's a homecoming. And that experience of finally being where your level of care is the baseline resonance, not the exception, that changes something in the way that you can be and show up and receive. Not just in your work, but how you understand what's really been possible all along. The inverse is also true. When someone does not operate this way, these standards feel like pressures or an imposition or an inconvenience, like, whoa. They may even seem unreasonable when it's actually quite the most simple request, like one of ours, being early and prepared. That's just a signal that they aren't perhaps in the right room for where they are. And there's no judgment in that, because not every environment is built for everyone. But if you have been the highest standard in every room you've been in, and you've been quietly lonely for it, I want you to know that we exist. The Prestige is our high-touch somatic academy and community for practitioners and leaders who are not struggling, not stuck, but who do know that there's a next chapter, who can feel it, who are done waiting for an environment that can actually hold all of them at the level that they're capable of. We don't do mainstream development advice. We already assume you've heard it and can filter that for yourself. Our work is founded on the understanding that real change happens in the body, not just the mind alone. That capacity, not knowledge, is what moves the needle. And that the right room with the right people at the right time and the right level of standard, well, it's one of the most powerful environments for development that exists. We have an event coming up, Bohemian Rhapsody, that is crafted for the artist, the leader, the creative visionary at the edge of evolution, personally and professionally. If you are at that place, on the precipice of something, knowing that there's more, and craving an environment that is built on artistry and excellence and resonance, rather than formulas and frameworks, and you're looking for depth and elite level support, and you are decisive when something is aligned, well, we want to hear from you. For those who are considering applying and stepping into membership for our fall season, we would love to include you at our next event as your initiation into the Prestige. For now, thanks for joining me for this video. If you made it to the end, please do consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.